my time. I pay for my crime.
World Jam Global Radio. This is clarity.
I already did my time. I pay for my crime.
Time to wish you all a good evening from Kervin, Julien, live in the World Jam Global Radio Studios, bringing you another edition of Issues Today.
I pay for my crime. I already did my time. I pay for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival.
For those of you that are regular listeners, last week we had Death Encounters, which was the part one.
I learned
Deadly Encounters.
There was not
upon the death of Alton Sterling,
my hand,
Philando,
my feet,
Castile,
swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money,
which then culminated with an absolutely horrid week.
The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a champ.
Where a peaceful protest was hijacked in Dallas.
Ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with.
Where there were 11 injured officers and 5 killed.
I paid for my crime. Already getting my time. I paid for my crime.
All sad to say, police shootings have not stopped.
My crime.
And without being disrespectful in any way,
I paid for my crime.
This outbreak, which saw 5 police officers shot dead in an ambush in Dallas last week, seemed to be a standalone incident.
But I never got how my own.
And as sad as we are for the loss of those lives,
I'm telling my story to you and you.
And rightly so,
I must admit, I was doing all kinds.
I still feel the outrage.
And thinking over since I've gotten older, the life I
but the same sort of sensitivity and outrage hasn't been shown for their lives that have been lost.
I was nobody
and continue to be lost. As once again we have another cop in Atlanta opening fire in a vehicle without knowing who the suspects or the individuals were. And another young black man has lost his life.
Could be facing life in prison.
It continues.
Already did my time.
And tonight we have some celebrated guests.
Did my time.
The welcome return of the one and only, my friend, my sidekick, ride shotgun with me, Dr. David Ramey will be coming to him very shortly.
Time.
We also have, once again, from the last couple of weeks, we've had Charlie Graspy joining us. We have Charlie again tonight, sitting alongside Dr. David.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
We also have ready and available Pastor Greg Greer, public speaker, pastor and activist,
all of my friends in the
and former chief of police, Justin Powers.
There was
hopefully still to join us is Alex Salazar, former LAPD cop.
I was swimming in women. I had
and also public speaker, activist,
so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole
Cephas, Uncle Bobby Johnson.
I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail.
We do have problems connecting with one or two of those.
Already did my time.
But Charlie, David, Justin, and Greg are here.
Did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
Last night we saw the outbreak of the military coup in Turkey.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
We've seen the UK change Prime Minister.
But I never got how my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent, I must admit.
And we saw Donald Trump trying to draw a card.
Sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I'm
postponing his rally and his declaration of nomination of nominee for his sidekick, his running mate.
Meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Because of what was going on in Turkey, and I don't know about you, but I'm a bit surprised as to why.
Already did.
Does he even care?
For my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time. I paid for
but more importantly, my friends,
already did my time.
This show is entitled Deadly Encounters 2 The Uprising. And we are going to be taking a deep look into the into what went on in the outbreak of violence that saw 11 officers shot, injured, and 5 killed. And we are going to extend, expand, and revisit the deaths of our young black men and women on the streets of America. So join me today in just a few moments' time. I'll be introducing our guest, Charlie Gatsby, Greg Greer, Justin Powers. But first and foremost, let me introduce you to my sidekick, my running mates, Dr. David Ray. Hey, Dr. David, how are we?
Kervin, I'm sitting in Connecticut on the Atlantic Ocean, looking toward England, and the weather is steaming hot, 94 degrees Fahrenheit, and humid, and the masses are on the beaches tearing up my beautiful environment that I care for, fall, winter, and spring, and then they bring their big, fat, trotting feet on my beach and act like they own it. And if I could, I'd send them all into the bottom of the ocean. But then I'd be accused of being a misogynist, and I don't want people to think that I'm a misanthrope, misogynist, or chauvinist, even though at times I do feel like I am a misanthrope, and Moliere could write a story about me. What are we in America? President Obama this week said that we have to stand in each other's shoes, and we have to look at the world through each other's eyes, and we have to abandon the overheated rhetoric and oversimplification that reduces the whole categories of our fellow Americans and world citizens not to opponents, but instead to enemies, and I'd say deadly enemies. No more than he said that than a leading person in Dallas, where he said it after 5 policemen had been murdered. He said, this Dallasite said, citing high birth rates among black single mothers, he demanded that African Americans start telling black girls to keep their legs together and to tell the young men to keep their zippers closed. He said that a reduction in birth rates by black single parents would make, quote, one hell of a difference in our community, and that the blacks are responsible for all that they're enduring today. He wants to kill all the blacks. We need a race war in this country, and he represented the ideas of Dylan Roof and other KKK Confederate flag-waving freaks as though they're the standard in America. It's as if they heard nothing of what the president said. And while the whole nation lowered flags and mourned over the deaths of 5 innocent white policemen, and we all have sympathy for them, we have to remember that last year, policemen murdered 105 black Americans who were unarmed. Black people without any weapon on them. What did they do? They put their arms around their necks in New York City and choked a man to death for selling cigarettes. They put another woman on the ground, Sandra Bland, and our show, Kervin, you and I had the first big expose on Sandra Bland. They slammed her face into the earth, put her in a jail, and they said she committed suicide. We don't even know that. But Sandra Bland, a young black woman who had the audacity to question a white policeman, is now dead, 2 meters under the earth, in the cold, rotten, black earth, with no sunlight, no flowers, no life, not breathing, not anymore in the image of God walking on this earth. And yet, 1 in 3 black people killed by police in 2015 were identified as unarmed. And even that number is probably highly underreported, because we know the American police forces are being trained by Israel, and no forces on earth have conquered and mastered the art of shoving guns and knives by their victims' dead bodies and saying, look, he carried a knife, while they point a gun at his head, as in Hebron, and execute a person in cold blood, saying, he's an Arab, he deserved to die. 37% of unarmed people killed by police in America were blacks, even though blacks only make up 13% of the American population. That tells you that unarmed African American citizens are killed at 5 times the rate of unarmed whites in 2015. Only 10 of the 102 cases in 2014 where unarmed black Americans were killed resulted in any charges being brought against the police. And only 2 had officers that were convicted. That's less than a 2% conviction rate for killing unarmed black men and women who probably had the audacity to exert their rights in the face of those men carrying high-powered weapons that can execute on sight. Now, let me say something about the tragedy in Dallas and Baton Rouge and St. Paul and all the other cases in America. America is being torn apart. We're being torn apart by the provocative speech of the Republican candidates for office in this country, led by the most racist, insulting, uncivilized creature ever put on a major political party in the Western world, Donald Trump. As Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, he is a fake, he is a liar, and he won't even reveal his income taxes. This man who promised the nation that he would fund his own campaign has now gone down on his hands and knees and begged Sheldon Adelson, the biggest neo-fascist Zionist on earth, a gambling casino criminal from China in Las Vegas, to give him $6 million for his party in Cleveland, a city where the police went and killed a 9-year-old boy in a park for simply having a play gun and entertaining himself in the park, and he happened to be African American. Shot him on sight, shot him down. And all he had was a plastic rubber gun. But don't forget, in Charleston, a policeman chased down an African American who had a broken tail light, shot him in the back 3 times, and then put a gun on top of him. So we know the story of these police, and America is being ripped apart. And the only civilized force trying to bring us together as a nation with higher ideals of dignity and freedom and humans in God's image made, is President Obama. And what did this man, Ben Shapiro in Dallas, say about President Obama after he spoke and said, let us find the better angels in ourselves? He said that Obama is a disgusting human being, that he is an opportunistic, a despicable, and a moral, quote, turd sandwich. Turd is a crude redneck word for defecation. That is poop. Now, how can anyone speak of a man like President Obama in those terms? And then Newt Gingrich, the man who divorced his first wife when she was dying of cancer, the man who revealed the FBI files on the President Clinton investigation having intimate sex with a legal age girl, the man who impeached President Clinton, the man who divorced 2 women, the man who's married to a money-grubbing conservative woman, a man who hasn't told the truth any more than a worm can fly. Newt Gingrich came out this week and said, after the Nice attack in France, that we have to give Muslims a test in America. And if Americans believe that Sharia is a good set of laws, we have to export them, take away their citizenship. Now, what if we did that to Jewish law, halakha? What if Jews got a test in America that if they believe in circumcision, they believe in halal, kosher food, if they believe in going to Shabbos, what if Jews got a test? Would they be expelled? Would I be expelled? What if Christians got a test? Newt Gingrich violates all terms of civilization and American law. Now, we've had 161 Turks killed last night in an attempted coup that was inspired by Netanyahu and Putin in Turkey, of a democratic government. Even though I don't like Erdogan, he was democratically elected. And he's not a Hitler, he's not a Mussolini. He can be thrown out of office by a democratic vote. Now, to overthrow that with a military coup sponsored by Netanyahu, who wants Syria, and Russia, who wants revenge for their airplane shot down, is an absolute disgrace. And President Obama did the right thing in reviewing the circumstances before saying anything. Donald Trump would have come out there as a duck and quacked like an idiot, just like he did over Egypt and Libya and every other failure that he would bring about. We've had 84 killed in Nice by a man who was given 100,000 pounds to commit murder by a fascist ISIS organization. And why did that happen? We need to ask why in France are the Muslims, who are part of their population, not a part of their society and culture? Why are they put down? Why are they locked up and killed at a higher rate than the French who are not Muslim? Why are they put in ghettos? Why are they not given good jobs? Why can they not get into the university? You cannot make a people like we have done in America, outcast in a society, and then expect them to love that society. They demand justice. They demand dignity. And until France and Europe treat Muslims like they treat every other citizen, there will be continued unrest. Those European countries either have to accept the fact that they are going to have foreigners live there and do their dirty work, or they're not. But they cannot have them, and they cannot have them not do the work. Now, let me say one thing about Orlando. 49 gay people were killed in Orlando, Florida. And they were killed by a man who hates gay people because he could not come to terms with his own gay life. But he had a permission to kill gay people because the Republican Party in America hate one group more than blacks, and that's gay people. They hate gay people. They despise gay people. They think gay people should be put in concentration camps and liquidated, and they don't feel much better about blacks. Let me tell you something about Donald Trump's choice for vice president. The governor of Pennsylvania, Mike Pence, considers himself a champion for traditional marriage, that is, anti-gay marriage. And he has fought against marriage equality throughout his time as a public servant and his entire public life. During his State of the Address speech in Pennsylvania, Pence made some contradictory statements surrounding marriage equality and gay marriage. He said, no one should be harassed or mistreated because of who they are, who they love, or what they believe. Now, Pence said this not about gay people. Mike Pence, the Republican vice president nominee, said this about Christians. He thinks that giving gay people freedom, dignity, equal rights in marriage, allowing them to have their own children, adopt other children, he thinks that is discriminating against Christian Americans. He thinks that is hurting straight marriages. Maybe a gay person lived next door to Donald Trump, and that's why he got married 3 times. Maybe a gay person next door to Ronald Reagan convinced him to divorce his first wife and marry Nancy. Maybe a gay person like Michael, whoever, lived next to Elizabeth Taylor and made her marry 8 times, or Zaza Gabor and made her marry 10 times. We don't know why all these straight people disrespect marriage so terribly and defy the Christian mores, but they blame it on gay people. If a gay person can make you turn gay or make you divorce your wife, then the gay people have a lot more power than they've ever let on. But of course we know that's not true. And the sad thing in America is that racial relations and anti-gay rights and anti-women rights and anti-poverty rights, all these things are ripping our country apart because the middle class, white, bigot Christian cannot understand that America is changing. We are turning browner. We are turning more cosmopolitan. We are becoming bilingual. We are respecting the dignity of everyone to love and live with whomever he chooses. We are expanding the freedoms of this country, just exactly as our founding fathers anticipated. And these people who fear losing their white privilege cannot stand it. And until we change it, the police will continue to kill innocent black people. Maniacs will continue to kill abortion doctors. Insane people will continue to kill gay people. And our country will be torn asunder. And that is the way it is in America today.
Oh, once again, thank you very much, Dr. David Rumey, for another chair-binding visit to what's happening in America. And we're going to be back to you again very shortly, as we always are. My co-host, my dear friend, whom I've missed over the last few weeks, and it's been great to hear your voice once again. Also with us, and let me just first apologize at the moment because Greg Greer is having problems with his audio. He is online, but he can't hear anything, which means that we might not be able to hear him either. So he's just informed me that he's about to connect to another PC and see if he can get that sorted out there. But he's online. He's part of this group, but he just can't hear us at the moment, and we obviously can't hear him. But also with me tonight are two others who are also with us. And I'm going to get a quick update from first Charlie Grabsby. How are you, Charlie?
I'm doing as good as I can be, I guess.
Okay, and how have you been since last week's show?
Busy. I'm working on preparing the Bernie Sanders delegates to know their rights and the rules of the convention so that they can stand their ground, which is going to be an interesting. It's going to be an interesting.
And Bernie has just endorsed Hillary, right?
He has.
And
of course,
I never thought I would see that Bernie would endorse Hillary. He actually, in fact, if I remember correctly, he said he would never do that.
Well, I knew it was coming. I know how it came about. I was actually at the platform committee in Orlando meeting, and I saw the writing on the wall there. But the thing is that you have to understand he has one vote, and Hillary needs millions, and the millions of Bernie supporters are not all following in Bernie's lead on that particular issue. So
here's the thing: that the onus has got to be to stop Trump getting into the White House, right?
Not in my view. I'm not responsible for what other people vote. I'm only responsible for my voice being heard through my vote, and my voice is not reflected in the voice of Hillary Clinton at all. Okay. If the Democrats are so fearful of losing to Trump, I think that they ought to recognize that you don't put up a divisive candidate and then break all your own party rules to force her on the voters.
Okay, well,
I think that was a really unwise thing to do.
Can I ask a question, all due respect? What rules did the Democrats break, Charlie?
Article 5, Section 4 of the Democratic National Committee Charter has what is known, or what I would call, the impartiality clause. It is absolutely a violation of the Democratic National Committee for any member of the DNC, let alone the chair. And it's the chair's responsibility to make sure that not only she, but all of the members do not in any way support any single candidate unless and until that candidate has been nominated by a roll call vote at the convention. Until then, the DNC has absolutely no role to play. It is not their business. It is not their role. And what they have done is they've circumvented the very process that was designed to produce unity through a representative convention where the delegates come with many voices and deliberate on what the party believes in and finds a candidate that's going to stand behind that. It was absolutely irresponsible. It is a trend that has been begun since Bill Clinton's reelection, when he convinced the party that the only way to beat the Republicans was to be like them and get rid of the Democratic part of the process and eliminate the people from really choosing and make it an elite determined decision. It was unwise. It is why the Democrats have lost every single campaign for the presidency except for the aberration of Obama and are about to probably lose this one too.
Okay,
they could not have anything more.
Guys, gentlemen, let's be very careful that we don't go off track on the theme of tonight's show.
That's true.
All right.
Yes, we are not on this topic.
It was a quick question, and I really loved the response. And I'm glad that David is up and fighting, and his hairs are standing on the back of his neck. But let's just remember what is the purpose of this particular show and the direction that we need to go. Now, very quickly, I've got two other guests. Greg has now got his audio sorted and is online. How are we doing, Greg? Hi, Greg. Okay, let me quickly, swiftly move over to Justin. Justin, are you there?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
Okay, well, Justin, again, I called this Deadly Encounter Part 2 because we were having a conversation in the midst of last week's show, and you was biting, chomping at the bit to delve in there. If I remember your words correctly, just as the uprising sprung out in Dallas, you actually said that you and Alex had been talking with each other, and you called it. You called it. You knew something was going to break loose.
Me and Alex discussed prior to the shooting. Actually, that morning, me and him were talking on the telephone, and I told Alex, I said, Alex, something's definitely going to happen here in the near future. People are just getting sick of what's going on. Besides the Black Lives Matter and the protesting, something definitely is going to happen where possibly police are going to be targeted by somebody or the group itself, as in either protesting or police officers are going to start getting hurt. And me and Alex were discussing this for about an hour. We hang up the phone, and literally 3 hours later, the shooting occurs, and me and Alex jump right back on the phone. I'm like, are you seeing this? He goes, man, we just called this. We said it was going to happen.
Yeah. And so your response, first and foremost, to the lives that was lost on that day, because obviously you're going to speak from a former police chief or police officer's point of view, and I want to give you an opportunity to do that because, again, as we have all agreed, those were also innocent lives that were taken.
Yeah, I think with the law enforcement community, it's being bludgeoned by hate right now. I agree with Dr. Romay. There is law enforcement officers that do target certain individuals of ethnicities, but I don't think that it's a systematic thing. I think it's more of who the individual is itself. Does it happen a lot? Yes. I do believe that I wrote a paper in my master's program. I believe the Black Lives Matter group and the law enforcement need to sit together and have a conversation away from the media's attention, to come down to the issues and come form some sort of agreement, not demands, but an agreement. See, in Memphis, Tennessee, right after the protesting happened the other day, the BLM walked in there. There was 200 people in there, and everybody had an opinion, and the police just sat there quietly along with Mayor Strickland, and everybody from the BLM was screaming at them, making demands. It wasn't what do you see, what's going to happen? It wasn't an open-ended question. It was demands. And that puts other people in a different predicament when something like that happens. There has to be some sort of peace negotiation that needs to occur where both sides come together. I understand where the BLM's coming from. I understand their movement. I see both sides. I really do. I see both sides. I see the law enforcement side, but I really do see the disadvantaged side to a lot of individuals of the ethnicity of African Americans. I think that the systematic issue that Dr. Romay kind of talks about too is police targeting. I think a lot of it too is a lot of these individuals that are being killed are from low income areas. And I got a case in point on that. I have a soldier of mine. We had military training for a couple weeks, and he came to me and he said, "Hey, Sergeant Powers, I just want to give you a heads up. My uncle got shot 3 times. He's in the hospital." I'm like, "Man, that's awful." 2 days later, he comes to me. He's like, "My brother, he's actually my cousin, but he's like my brother. He got shot a couple times. He's in the ICU. I need to go see him. I need emergency leave." So we filed a Red Cross message and we got him home. But I really told him, I said, man, I really feel sorry for you because half the kids you grow up with, you guys don't have a chance. You just don't have a chance. And he lives in a lower income area called Orange Mountain in Tennessee. It's in Memphis. And he told me, he told me straight up, he said, I'm a gangster disciple. And I'm like, I don't know if you're proud of that or not. And he goes, I am. He goes, but here's the thing. He goes, I wanted a better life. He goes, so I got out of the ghetto. He said, but, he goes, it's hard. And he goes, people get killed all the time. He said, but don't feel sorry for me. I said, well, I feel like a lot of these kids that get shot by the police or shot by anybody else, a lot of them, they don't have a chance. And I think society itself has set a lot of these individuals up for failure. You go to low-income housing areas, everything's provided to them by the government. A lot of them have no incentive. Being born into that environment, have no incentive to go to work and try to make better for themselves because they know the government's always going to take care of them. And I think a lot of that issue is we as a society need to come together and say enough's enough. We have to work through those issues. And I know you guys went off on political parties, but we talk about the welfare program, everything else. We need to get in these areas. We really need to outreach to people. Law enforcement does need to go through some sort of specialized training. I think personally, if you become a police officer or a peace officer, you need to get in plain clothes, and there needs to be an agreement, a written agreement between the BLM and law enforcement, and they need to get out in plain clothes and walk amongst the people that they work, the communities they work for. Get out there and talk to them, not as a law enforcement officer, but as an individual within the community.
Justin, let me ask you a question. This is David. I want you to address something that is really unspoken of in America right now, but there's been some reference to it. Some people came out and referred, I think it was a Miss Alabama, for example, an African-American in Alabama, came out and said that in some ways this young man, Micah Johnson in Dallas, was a hero for bringing attention, maybe she didn't use the word hero, but he should be admired for bringing attention to the fact that so many African Americans are being killed by police, and now a few police die, and the whole world goes upside down. How do you? I just don't know how to respond to that. How do you respond to that? I'm not being critical of her, but there's no doubt that the action in Dallas brought serious attention to police and African-American relations. How do you relate to that?
Actually, her comments were that she said that the shooter was a martyr.
A martyr?
The African population.
Okay.
The problem is his actions really took the focus away from Alton Sterling's case. It took the focus away from the Minnesota shooting. It took the focus away from the BLM. It focused more on law enforcement and how the law enforcement community came together. His actions, to me personally, was an act of terrorism. I think it's funny how we as Americans in our American politics, we think of terrorism only if it has Muslims are involved. That is an inaccurate statement. Look at Timothy McVeigh, for instance. He was a white Christian that went and blown up the Oklahoma City bombings. What this man did, and he shot up 5 officers, and he specifically targeted white police officers. This was an act of terrorism on his part. I think it really brought the situation to a head. But I also think it took the focus away from the shootings that occurred prior to that week.
Okay.
And
let me say this. No way would I stand and call this man a martyr. But there's an old saying that says you have to walk a mile in a man's moccasins. And we all know, we're intelligent individuals. We know what that means. And for a long time now, the black community have been suffering. For a long time now, the black community have been crying out for help. For a long time now, the black community have been victim to this mass slaughter of its young men and women innocently slain on the streets at the hands of police. For a long time now, the black community have seen the law enforcement and the justice system fail to take action or bring about consequence for anyone connected to or involved in the shooting, killing, and murder of innocent, unarmed individuals. For a long time now, the black people, the black communities, have been burying their dead single-handedly, without any help, without any support, and without any real comfort from the powers that be. For a long time now, the black communities have been watching as injustice upon injustice has been meted out against its people. And I don't disagree with one iota that the shooting, the killing, the murder of these police officers was nothing short of terrorism. But the fact that it took that to bring about the attention to the rest of the world, because let's not get this wrong, Justin. I tend to disagree with you, because I believe that incident actually got everybody else around the world, maybe not in America, talking about Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, right? As the reason and the cause for this outbreak. Now, I want to bring in Greg Gray here, because when I spoke to Greg at the end of last week's show and invited him to come into this show, I also had a friend of mine who's a British journalist who's been flown out to Dallas to report on this, and I wanted to make sure that the UK got the right story, so I was trying to tie him up with people in stateside that would be able to introduce him to what was going out on the streets, so he can get a real bird's eye view of what was taking place out there and the frustrations that the people and the families on both sides were feeling in the community.
I think without a doubt, Kervin, I think without a doubt, both sides of this situation are feeling it. I do agree with you. It brought more attention to the issue, but around the area I'm in the South, it really took the attention away from.
But of course, it's gonna. I know what part of the South where you live, and I would have expected that anyway, right? But it still doesn't take away from the fact that for a long time now, and last week, at the end of last week's show, I was looking at a particular article that had been brought out, and I referred to it as almost a competition, as we looked at the count that was going up month by month. And each month this year, the number of black individuals murdered at the hands of police have increased. And it's almost like a league of sports, a football thing or baseball or something.
Oh, I think it's criminal without a doubt. I'm not disputing that.
I don't want to take away from what the communities, what the black communities in America and their brothers and sisters around the world are now, because we've had Black Lives Matter protests for the first time in the UK. Right, hitting different cities in the UK in a direct response to the murders, the slaughters of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, which would have never been brought to their attention on our national media had the outbreak in Dallas not taken place. And it's an unfortunate reality that it took that for our media and medias around the rest of the world to pay attention or to give a focus to what was taking place in America. But I've got to tell you this, Justin, it took that for Sky News, for BBC, for ITV to make what took place with Alton Sterling and Philando Castile a headline news issue in this country. Our people in this country would have never heard about Alton Sterling or Philando Castile had what took place in Dallas had not taken place. And I want to bring in, very quickly, Greg Gray, who's been sitting on the sidelines waiting to speak. Greg, are you there? It seems like Greg is still struggling to hear us.
Well, Kervin, let me chime in there then while he fixes that, because both points are actually not mutually exclusive. Both aspects of that Dallas shooting are true. The Dallas shooting did take the focus away domestically here in particular from a very concerted response that was coming to a far greater degree than before in the wake of the prior two shootings, the Minneapolis and the Baton Rouge shootings. In fact, that's why that massive march, and it was amongst massive marches around the country was taking place. At the same time, it is very unfortunate, but it took that shooting of police officers for some other people to take notice. And so it's, you have to also understand and recognize that individual was just a particular individual who broke at that particular moment, because as Justin and Alex were talking about, it was inevitable that something like that was going to happen. And this is an individual who spent his youth in the military, came back home, and like many people who have come back home, particularly minorities from military service, and then gone back to the discrimination that is official. I'm not just talking about the societal, but I'm talking about the public officials who discriminate. It's not all of them, but it's any one is too many, and it's far more than one. And he was giving up in his life. He gave up his life. He was that frustrated. And I mean, it doesn't justify what he does, but you have to understand that. And it wasn't just him. It was going to be someone like him at some point in time. Now, I just want to make one further point. There is a systemic racist element at foot in what we are seeing. It is the disproportionality, and yes, a large part of it is socioeconomic and not just racist. The two overlap. But if we eliminate it, see, there's two problems going on that are mutually reinforcing and making this problem worse and worse. The disproportionality is definitely there in minority and low-income communities of the police present and of the police misuse and abuse of force, or misuse and abuse of authority, because it doesn't even have to be with force. It could be just arresting for things that shouldn't be arrested for. But oftentimes that comes inevitably with a misuse of force, which doesn't even necessarily have to be deadly force. It could just be other forms of force. And if you eliminated the racial dynamic that really is there, you would still have a problem with unjustified police shootings being a cancer that is killing this society. And I did get to this a little bit with Alex's questions, and I'd love to hear Justin's. I believe, Justin, you were chief of police in Auburn, right? One of my former undergraduate days.
I was chief down in Tennessee, in a small West Tennessee.
Tennessee. Okay, I'm thinking of a different. Yeah, I knew it was in the South, but yeah, no, I'm thinking of a different person that Kervin had on another time. But in the past couple decades, there were rules and there were laws and there were norms that police followed fairly strictly. The racial dynamic was there, but you didn't have this kind of semi-legitimized, quasi-legitimized shooting for traffic stops and for toy guns and for not obeying commands absolutely and falling down like a jellyfish. The police culture, which has been created in part by police unions, some pseudo-academics who have come up with justifications. And what they have done is they've taken the rules and they've semantically twisted them. The rules actually haven't tended to change, although they are pushing to change them formally. But it's more the informal justifications that are going on that say, if you don't comply, even if you verbally don't comply, meaning you question, why are you stopping me? Why are you arresting me? What have I done? Officers are being informally, not formally trained, informally trained that is unacceptable. Everybody must absolutely obey when an officer says jump. They must jump. And non-compliance is resistance. Resistance semantically can be linked to force. Force, therefore, can be met with counterforce. And now even counterforce doesn't even have to follow the use of force continuum. They have semantically twisted that around, even though it's there in the rules and it's not what it means to escalate to the use of deadly force. And this is a problem. These false justifications that are being trained informally with the backing of the unions, the backing of these pseudo-academics, and causing these officers to think this is okay. And so even the non-racist officer will tend to abuse force and not even realize they're abusing it. So, I mean, Justin, feel free to critique what I just said.
A lot of officers nowadays, you are correct to a point. A lot of officers these days are covered by good faith. They don't know they're doing wrong. They're covered under the good faith.
Hang on a minute. Let me just stop you there, Justin. How can they not know shooting dead an innocent man is wrong?
We're not talking. I'm not talking about shooting dead somebody.
Okay, so
I'm talking about just simple arrest if they did something wrong.
All right, watch this. Right. The total behavior from trying to harass an innocent black individual simply because of the color of his skin, right, has got to be deemed to be wrong. And if you're trying to tell me that the person that's perpetrating that does not know that it's wrong, then he should not be a police officer. There is something seriously wrong if you're trying to tell me that there's an individual wearing a badge to serve and protect that doesn't realize that victimizing an individual for any reason whatsoever, other than the fact that he's committing a criminal offense, is wrong.
Can I jump in real quick on that one?
Come in.
I think that we need to look at. I appreciate what everyone has said. But we need to look not at the police. The police are victims as much as they are perpetrators because they are the instruments of the powers that rule America. This has to be first looked at by the people. The American people are racist. Some are consciously racist, most are passively and unconsciously racist. But we do believe, above all, in white privilege. And when a black succeeds in America, it's because of, they had affirmative action. But when George Bush goes to Yale on a legacy, even though he had C's and D's on his high school report card, it's not seen as white privilege, it's seen as a right. Because he's a white man and he's a blue blood, and Yale takes in legacies. But a legacy is not given the same stigma as is a very high-achieving black who gets affirmative action. So it starts with the people. Wait. Let me finish. Now, the police are protected in their actions because they serve the powerful. Who protects them? The politicians and the DAs. DAs are elected. The district attorneys do not indict police because they are police themselves. Every district attorney has a badge and a gun and can arrest people. He is a policeman. He is not going to arrest his fellow policeman unless forced to do so. Politicians don't want to make the white privileged people vote against them. So they protect the DA in their decision. The non-indictments for crimes are the result of the demand of the white privileged DA and politicians. And the unions have exorbitant sums of money. The unions have exorbitant sums of money. Hello?
Yeah, that's coming through on your line, David.
It's not from my line.
Listen, hold on a second, David. Hold on a second. Everything you're saying is important and valid. But Kervin, you stopped Justin just as he was about to go down a path that is incredibly important to understand. It's not, let's put aside the context of where an officer is selectively choosing to target someone because of the color of their skin, and just get down to the mentality, remove all that, of how a police officer is now thinking in any encounter with a civilian, so to speak, in their language, a citizen, okay? And understand that there's something wrong in the logic that some of these officers, many of them, it's becoming more and more, are using in that process. And I think Justin was about to start explaining some of that.
Yeah, and one of the issues, Charlie, too, is this: is
Kervin.
Yes, are you there, Greg?
Hey, folks, how you doing?
Okay, guys, let's get Greg in. We've been desperate to get him in. He's been having audio problems for the entire show. We've now got him online, and it's an honour and a privilege to have you again with us, Greg. And I know you've been desperate to answer some of the points that have been coming across. So let's just give way. Let's just give way to Greg. Let Greg get in there because he's got some points that we've already gone past that he wants to respond to before we move forward. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, come on in, Greg.
All right.
As long as we can get back when it's done, because
we'll get back, Charlie. I promise you, we'll get back. You hold that thought. Write it down on a piece of paper. Put it by the side of you, and we'll get right back to it when Greg's done.
So what I want to say, first of all, is that we have to understand that our issue as a community and what confronts us has long been about separatism in our community. David Romay is right in many of his statements. We have to change the laws in the country. Justin had made a statement, and I'm sorry I have a slight delay in my microphone, but the statement about getting Black Lives Matters to talk to the police apparatus of our country is a bad suggestion. It's the wrong suggestion, because as a Black man in America, not that lobby does not represent all African Americans in this country. Now, let me tell you who I am, just briefly. I am the representative for Tamir Rice in Cleveland, Ohio, the young 12-year-old who was shot by the police. I also have represented national cases across the country. Most recently, I've been chosen to be the Alton Sterling's community representative for the Sterling family. At least one in defense of the Sterling family in the shooting that happened in Baton Rouge. We have to understand, with that being said, that being a human being has to be at the forefront of our public situation. When we are talking about Black Lives Matters, the Democratic Party, the National Republican Party, we are missing the whole boat, because a lot of this has to do with the separatism of our country. But I'd like to submit something a little bit more deeper than that we can't completely isolate the challenges that confront us as a community. But we have to understand that the laws that are on the books as of currently, even the Constitution of the United States of America, are antiquated documents that weren't written for any of us, a lot of us, and they have to change. We have to change the laws of the lands. So I submit that the problems that we're dealing with as a people, as a community, as a nation, is because we don't know how to come together. Also, we need to better interpret the Constitution and the laws and how they felt to people.
Oh, and that's so on point. That's so on point, Greg.
Greg, I'd like to say, Greg, I agree with you so much. Just the other day, I was thinking we should not only amend the U.S. Constitution, but that part that refers to African Americans as 3/5 of a citizen should be purged. No child in America, white or black, should ever read those words. They are pornographic, they are violent, they are dehumanizing. No person. Those words should be struck from the Constitution itself and never, ever allowed to be read by a human being. It would be like the new German Constitution saying Jews are rats and Jews are not Germans and Jews have only 1/2 the value of a German life. That would be unacceptable to the civilized world. And yet, anyone reading the Constitution of the United States of America from the 9th grade up reads those words without often reading the Amendment 13 and 14 and 15 that cancels them. So I agree with you, Greg. We need to strike those words.
Can I say this? Can I say this? What you're talking about is the Dred Scott decision out of Missouri. Correct me if I'm wrong. And Dred Scott,
he's talking about the language of the Constitution that was used originally to apportion.
1 second, Charlie.
He's talking about the.
1 second, Charlie. Go on, Greg.
Charlie, he's referring to the Dred Scott decision, which Dred Scott was a slave, a free slave who was put back into bondage, and the decision was that he was never considered a human being, but he was considered 3/5 of a human being and did not deserve the rights of an American citizen.
Yes, I understand the Dred Scott decision, but what David was getting to was something that came before that, which is in the Constitution itself, and actually it comes actually from a law that existed prior to the Constitution under the Articles of Confederation that determined taxation at the time, in which the 3/5 clause was a compromise in order to determine the apportionment of representatives by state. And perversely, the southern slaveholding states didn't want to exclude the African American slave as citizens because that would reduce their representation. And so they wanted to include it. And so the compromise came, it used this prior language to say, well, we'll count them as 3/5 of a person. And so that's where that 3/5 comes from in the Dred Scott decision as well.
Excuse me. Hang on a minute. Excuse me for being ignorant, gentlemen. But let me just say something that just comes right off the top of my head. The very fact that we need a clause of any type whatsoever to represent the black individual says that there's something wrong.
Well, we don't anymore. That language is a vestige. It doesn't apply anymore in the Constitution. It was the original enforcement.
No. Wait a minute, Charlie.
Somebody has the radio, somebody has the internet on in the background, and they need to turn that off, or they need to mute it.
Charlie, can you hear me?
I can hear you. And I just want to say, I'm not saying that the impact of that is not continuing to this day.
Charlie,
the laws in America
Charlie, hang on 1 second. 1 second, Charlie. Hang on 1 second. Go on, Greg.
Charlie, those laws still apply today. It does apply, and it is African Americans and black people in America are still subject to the 3/5 rule.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely, yes.
What you're referring to, see, we have to distinguish two things here, Greg and Justin. What you're saying is that there's a legacy of the racist underlying origins of law in America, and that's actually very true. And there's an extremely good book out there called In the Matter of Color, written by Leon Higginbotham. It's subtitled Race and the American Legal Process, the Colonial Period, which amply documents that. The distinction, however, is the 3/5 clause in the Constitution has no longer any legal direct significance today. It's a vestige, but the language is still there in the document. The legacy of the influence of how that came about has never been eliminated from law. But that particular clause in the Constitution no longer has any legal effect.
Okay,
Listen.
one second. As Dr. David May brought up this subject, let's get Dr. David to clear this up.
Let me just say real, and then I'd want to move beyond we're not constitutional scholars here, but let's be clear.
Well, actually, David, I am.
Well, good. Charlie is correct in terms of my reference being to the basic document of the Constitution as written in 1787. But Greg is also correct that the Dred Scott decision affirmed that African Americans are even less than 3/5. They are only property and chattel. They were only counted as 3/5 to increase the voting population in the representation in the House of Representatives. So both are correct in a way, but technically I was referring to the basic document of the original Constitution with the 10 amendments, not beyond that. And Dred Scott was much later, I think 1854 or 52, and that referred to a slave who had run away and achieved freedom in either Kentucky or Indiana, I can't remember, and he was he was forced to return back to the slave owner because the court at that time determined, in accordance with the Constitution, but not in accordance with any rational law, that he was mere property and no different than a cow or a chicken that had to be returned to its owner. But let's go back to what we were.
Statutes, the Fugitive Slave Act.
Okay, move on. I want to talk about this thing about the police. And Justin, you can come in here too, and Greg. I was very, very upset when some states began to clamp down on police violence after the Eric Gardner strangulation in New York. And the FBI reported, and others reported, that some police were doing slow down and not doing their work in protest against not getting the slave support that they thought they deserved from de Blasio, the mayor of New York, and other political leaders in the country. I'd like you guys to respond to the ethical nature of that type of blackmail by paid police officers who refused to do their work because they weren't slavishly worshipped and required to obey the law.
All right. Here's the thing about that. It's wrong. They should do their job. Not disputing that at all. But here's the other thing, too. I've made the statement several times. I know some of you guys know my story about how I bucked the system, per se. And everybody says, well, where's the good cops when bad stuff happens? The good cops are there. I was a good cop. I stood up for what was right. But what happened to me is I was chastised by the law enforcement community. Any cop that stands up and does the right thing, he's going to be chastised. When you were talking about the district attorney, the DA only prosecutes people that go against law enforcement. Our DA has prosecuted officers in the past, but it's people that's bucked the system, that's talked bad either about the DA or went against the district attorney in some way, shape, or form. Anybody that bucks the system in law enforcement is going to be chastised by the law enforcement community like I was. As in not doing their job, they should do their job. That's not an issue. But I have came back, and I've said this several times since I've left law enforcement. Being a white law enforcement officer right now, it is hard to do your job to the fact if you're working in the African-American community, because when you arrest somebody, you're labeled as a racist. Or if you are involved, say you're involved in a legitimate shooting, you may get cleared by the district attorney's office, but then you're going to turn around and get sued immediately. But isn't it just as hard
as being a black individual in a community being stopped by a police officer in fear of the fact that you're probably going to end up losing your life? Where's the balance?
What's that?
Is it not just the same thing as a black individual in the community? Is he not in fear of his own life every time he gets stopped by a police or a police car passes? I mean,
this is the problem. This is the problem, Kervin. I think that people really truly believe that a white officer is just targeting an African American male. I don't think that is necessarily correct. You have 100% of police officers, and you have the bad apples that are 5 to 10% of the police force. Okay,
but here's the issue for me, Justin.
5 or 10%.
Here's the issue for me. We're not talking about. I'm not really worried about the 5% that are bad. That's not what I'm really on about. The 5% or the 10% that's bad. Yes, that's wrong, right? My real issue comes with the fact that when the wrong is done and it is known to be wrong, right? There is no consequence. There is no follow-up. There is no justice. And the families that are losing their families cannot see anything going around. There is nobody saying, listen, officer, you were wrong and you will pay for your crime. And that's what we need to start happening before any form of trust.
But see, there you go. There you go again. Let's talk about Michael Brown and all these other cases that have happened. I've talked about this several times. Me and Alex actually sat down and talked about this. These officers were cleared by a jury of their peers. A jury of their peers met together and did not indict them.
And the jury of their peers consisted of what?
Justin, Kervin, can I jump in there, please?
Absolutely.
This argument cannot become police versus the community, Justin, and everyone else. And that's what we're hearing. We're hearing it too much. In the case of Mike Brown, Shamir Rice, Eric Gardner, Elton Sterling, even though there are various degrees and levels of what's happening, we've got to understand three things. A lot of times in these communities, these citizens, these peoples have been treated very unfairly. And when I say that, to the extent to whereas in Ferguson, if you want to talk about Ferguson, yes, they were cleared by a grand jury, but that process was suspect. The people in the community had been oppressed by the police officers to the extent that the DOJ, Department of Justice, came in and filed a libel suit against, in their consent decree, against the police department, which that consent decree they're under right now. So there had been issues with policing, heavy-handed tactics in the community. It has to stop. If we put this argument on the illness of there are 5% of police officers who do bad and maybe another 95 who do good, then we would do better to say we have to eliminate the 5% who do bad and tackle that problem.
That's spot on there. But that's not as far as it goes, though. It goes much deeper than that, because you've got the 5% who do wrong, but then you've got those that are in power above them that does not correct that wrongness or give consequences towards it. So more importantly, what they're actually doing is condoning that very behavior that we're sitting down here trying to challenge at this precise moment in time.
Yeah, there's definitely ethical issues that are taking place within the law enforcement community that really need to come into question.
So where does trust, a community trust, come into this equation, right, when it cannot be seen to be done? How do you know which is going to be the good cop or which is going to be the bad cop? How do you know, as a citizen walking down your street, being confronted, how do you know which one's going to be the one that's going to pull his gun and kill you, and which one is the one that's in genuine fear for his life? How do you know? You don't know, because the bottom line is, when they are being found out, when they are being caught out. In fact, we now have it being said that this officer who shot the guys in the car in Atlanta, there's now a warrant out for his arrest for murder. I got to admit, I'm gobsmacked. I'm absolutely surprised that we've had a response as quickly as that. But I'm just wondering, had not the events taken place in Dallas as they had, would there have been as quick a response as a warrant for this guy's arrest? Maybe you might want to answer that, Justin.
Who are you talking about? The shooter's arrest or the officer's?
The officer's arrest. There's a warrant out for his arrest for murder.
The one in Atlanta? The
one in Atlanta that just happened yesterday. I think it was yesterday, was it?
Yeah, I didn't see that one.
Okay, well, they've actually admitted that they were totally unaware of who was in the car at the time that they started shooting at it, and they've actually killed an innocent individual again. Not too different to Alton Philandro Castile. But now,
they should be held accountable, and they should go to prison.
The officer was fired, allowed to go. Now they've issued a warrant for his arrest.
No, they should see, and that's the problem too, though. What happens is these police departments, they'll say, well, we're going to fire them, and then now we're going to arrest them. And the reason is they're trying to cut the liability from getting sued. What they need to do is just go ahead and arrest them, and then go ahead and fire them. They're trying to do it in reverse order because they're trying to reduce liability.
There lies the fundamental problem of trust. Because rather than dealing with the issue that is directly connected to the victim in this crime, they're more concerned with protecting themselves.
Well, this is the other problem too, Kervin. Law enforcement community, okay? If you want change in your police department, you need to go to your politicians in your local community and request that change to your mayor's office, to your alderman, etc. Most police chiefs are appointed by the mayor. They're appointed by the mayor, and who appoints the mayor? The people. All right. So the only way to really turn around your communities is the community coming together and talking with the mayor and the alderman and asking for the change. Go to your local police department under the Freedom of Information Act and ask for their standard operating procedures. If you find something that is conflicting or something that you see out of the whack, go to your local politicians and ask and request for the change, because a lot of these departments are dictated by their city ordinances. You have your state laws that you have to follow, but like for the city of Memphis, a lot of officers make arrests due to city ordinances versus state laws. And
let me say something. I have two comments to make about this, Justin, and I really like what you add. First, if you go down and ask for your police standard operating procedures, and you question the police in your community with the mayor or others, you better not live in a glass house. You better not drive 1 mile over the speed limit. You better not look at one item of pornography on the internet. You better make sure you're living a more pure life than the Virgin Mary herself. Because if you don't, they're going to come after you big time. Number two, Justin, when you said that those officers were not indicted, I'd like to remind you, with all respect in the world, a grand jury has to indict someone on a felony charge. A grand jury will indict a ham sandwich, as is well known, if a prosecutor asks them to do so. And a grand jury will not indict Charles Manson or a mass murderer if the prosecutor says, well, I don't think I could convict him. And that is the way a grand jury. So when you say he is judged on an indictment by a group of his peers, that is not true. Those grand juries are selected by prosecutors very carefully to represent the Rotary Club, the Kiwanis Club, the Country Club, and all the others, Uncle Tom's, Aunt Jemima's, and white privileged establishment that will do precisely and exactly what the DA wants them to do. Absolutely. So when it comes to a jury trial, that is a little different. But when it comes to a grand jury, they're a club. They're taken to lunch by the DA. They live by the DA. They do for the DA. They meet with the DA for over 6 months, and they feel a part of the system. So they are not judged by their peers when they are not indicted, but rather protected by their DA, the chief law enforcement officer of that district.
Well, see, and that's where people have to have their own.
Come in, Greg.
That's where people have to have their own gall and stand up for what's right.
But they don't.
And as for the SOPs,
I think
Justin,
Greg wants to come with a point.
Can I just say this? Look, the other part about that is the grand jury process is the second part of it. Let's talk about when the problem happens, when the crime is committed, when a police officer shoots an innocent or murders an innocent, or if there's even a question, they're protected by the Policeman's Bill of Rights, which changes from state to state. Now, you can go to your police captain or commander in your community, but it's a higher level than that, which is what I believe Dr. Ramey was saying. The Policeman's Bill of Rights gives an instant layer of protection to those officers who commit a crime. So now we are stuck in prosecuting those officers, and they are protected all the way through an indictment process.
Greg,
to the point of the grand jury.
Greg, let me jump in. Let me make that very clear to our audience here. When you, a non-policeman, are suspected of a crime, the police investigate you immediately, ask you questions, sometimes don't read you your Miranda warnings and then lie about doing so. They will torture you. They will do anything to get information from you. But when a policeman is suspected of a crime, even murder, he doesn't have to answer one single question for 24 or 48 hours or 72 hours, depending upon his district and that policeman Bill of Rights. He is not subject to immediate questioning by authorities. And that gives him time to lawyer up, to meet with his union, and to get his lies together with his fellow officers. Now that is not justice.
Okay, can I please step in here for a second? Just please, for 1 second. Okay?
Who is this?
Now,
this is Charlie.
The Policeman's Bill of Rights. The Policeman's Bill of Rights is one of those things I was discussing that has come from police unions and pseudo-academics and has been drilled into heads of police officers informally on the job as a Bill of Rights. There is no such thing as a police officer's Bill of Rights. There's one Bill of Rights in the United States. It applies to all citizens as citizens. There is a clause that changes, but it tends to be the same in effect because it's nationally created by these interest groups and unions that is negotiated into police union contracts. And it creates a layer of procedural, procedural means whereby they are treated differently. Yes. Those do not have to be enacted. They are irresponsibly enacted, but they are not bills of rights. Yet you will hear them treated as if they were, and that creates this whole mentality that I was trying to get, Justin, which is very important to start to understand. If you really want to understand why police abuse force, put aside how they do it disproportionately in minority demographics and how that has a racial dynamic that's adding to that. But get to the issue of why police are abusing force generally and thinking it's legitimate, and you start to get an understanding of the problem that people don't have yet. And I think Justin can give you some insight into that.
You know, here's the thing. I don't want to disrespect anybody's opinion. You guys are all professionals, and I value your opinions and our friendships and relationships very well. But there are a couple of things that I struggle with, because I've also been a victim of police brutality right here in the UK, and I've also witnessed the mentality of the old brigade as we knew it to be back in the 70s and 80s, before our civil rights were addressed and put in a better position than they used to be. I've also sat here on the sidelines for a long time watching what's happening to my brothers and sisters out there in America and in other countries around the world, and I am struggling to come up with an understanding as to how it is tolerated in any way, shape or form. Let me explain this. As a parent, right, you raise your children to do the right thing, right, and every now and again you get called into the school, right, because your child has misbehaved, your child has not attended, your child has disrupted the classroom or whatever, and the head of year, the head teacher, the headmaster, the head of the school calls you into the office and gives you this list and this report of how your child has been behaving. You cannot sit there and palm that off as, well, I go to work and my mother sometimes looks after him, and when I don't get back on time, the neighbor has him for an hour or so, and then when the neighbor's got to go back home, his older brother has him for about an hour and a half, and then when I get home, I've actually only got about 20 minutes or so to spend with him to really correct all the things that he's done wrong and get him ready back for school tomorrow. You are the parent. You are responsible for your child's behavior from the day he's born until the day you die. Now, there is no difference when you're talking about an organization, a responsibility that comes with protecting and serving your community. There is an accountability that has to be yours, owned by you from the get-go. There is no escape clause. There is no palming it off to some other authority. There is no expectations that should be laid on any other organization to take responsibility for what my child does. At the end of the day, that is my responsibility, and if my child has to be punished, or I need to be punished for what my child does, then that's the accountability that comes with being in control and in charge of that situation.
Kervin, you know as well as anybody what I have lived through at the hands of police abuse. So you can't think that I'm justified in any way. What I'm trying to help you and the audience get an understanding of is why your very rational condemnation of this is not computing in many and in a growing number of police officers today, because of the inculturation of this informal police culture reconception of their role in society and their relationship between the civilian, as they see it, which is really a citizen, and themselves. Here's
my question to you, Charlie. Right? We had a very similar system right here in the UK, and if other countries can show change, right, to managing their police or their justice system, then tell me why the hell America can't.
I'm trying to show you one of the reasons why.
It's not making sense, Charlie. Because the bottom line is
argument.
Kervin, it doesn't make rational sense. What you have to understand is how, in their minds, it makes sense to them. If you want to understand the problem, you have to try to understand it. I'm not saying to justify it. I'm saying to understand it. To critique it successfully, you have to understand it first. To cure a disease, you have to know what the disease is first.
One second, calm down, Charlie. So watch this. Hang on a minute, Greg. So watch this. So I go to the school to go and visit the headmaster because my child has been misbehaving. And the headmaster says that my child, right, has just whacked this kid around the head with a baseball bat. So I asked my child, why did he do it? And my child says, well, the kid was calling me names, right? The kid was bullying me. The kid was taking my dinner money off me. Now, do I allow all of this stuff to pile up and justify my child's reaction based on my emotional state with my child, right? Or do I turn around to my child and say, well, you know what? Yeah, this kid might have been out of order. This kid might have been wrong, but what you did was wrong. Now, the question I'm posing is this. It doesn't really matter. We're not talking about what an individual does on the streets. In order for there to be an entrustment between a community and a police force, they have to believe that the police are just. And what we're trying to say here is they're not just, because they're going out into communities and they are killing innocent black folk. And they are killing them because of the color of their skin. Now, the moment that starts taking
nobody's
place...
debating you on that. Nobody's disagreeing.
So that therefore, the change has to be made.
Listen, stop, pause for a second. Listen to what I'm trying to say. If you want to understand the disconnect that the police officer...
You're yelling. Charlie, you're yelling. Calm down.
Okay.
Calm down. It's hurting my ears.
If you want to understand the disconnect from rationality and morality that is behind the thought process of police officers who abuse force without having that discord with morality, you have to understand why and what they're thinking. And what I'm trying to say is Justin can begin to shed some light on that if you give him a chance to talk about it. It's not justifying what they're doing.
All of it doesn't make sense because for me, it's simple, right? It's not so much that the police are doing it that is causing us the problem. It's the fact that they've been allowed to get away with it. That's the real issue.
The fact that it is legitimized in the system. Exactly. But you have to understand why it's being deemed legitimized. That's the problem. If you don't understand the why it's legitimized, you're not going to legitimize.
So one second. So Dr. David Rumey has constantly spoke about on this particular show, right, that there needs to be justice reform. It has to start with justice reform. Because until there starts to be consequences for these actions, then no one's going to take it seriously that they don't need to comply.
Hello.
Nobody's
coming in, Greg. One second, Charlie. Charlie. Coming in, Greg.
Hello.
Coming in, Greg.
Hey, I'm here. Just got back in.
Hey, I want to give you guys something real quick. In Los Angeles, 14 of 23 people killed by police last year were Latino, who make up roughly half of the population, according to the Los Angeles police or Los Angeles. Does any of you know who the last Latino was that was killed by police?
No.
Does any of you know who the last white person that was killed by police?
No.
Okay, there is a disproportion with law enforcement killing African Americans. I get that. But there's other minorities that are also being killed as well.
Let me explain this to you. 1 minute, Justin. White folks are not being shot because they're white. Here's the difference. White folks, white kids on the streets of America are not being shot because they're white. Fat guys are not being shot because they're fat. Guys with ginger hair are not being shot because they've got ginger hair. Black youths, black men are being shot because they're black.
So you truly believe all black people are being killed because they're black?
No, but there's a disproportionate amount of people who have been shot, who have been criminalized, who have lost their lives because of the color of their skin. And this argument has been going on for a better part of 50 years or more. And then if you really want to go back to systematic racism, you can go back hundreds of years. So what we have to do is we have to have a sincere argument that's at the heart of the conversation, because all of this prefabricated, pre-filtered conversation is not going to solve the problem. If our argument is one-sided and jaded and we don't have a true dialogue, then we're going to lose every time.
Look, nobody is disagreeing that there are disproportionate uses and abuses of force and killings in minority communities. Nobody here in this context, in this conversation, is arguing that it is right or okay. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to let.
See, there you go. You misconstrued that.
Let's get Justin to clarify what he was saying.
Can you finish what I'm saying?
What I'm telling you is that there is other people that are being killed as well. But police are not police. I do not believe that police are just targeting African American communities and killing black people indiscriminately. I do believe that there is law enforcement officers that have killed black people for no reason. I do believe that has occurred, Greg. I'm not disputing that one bit whatsoever. Okay, like the guy in Minnesota, that should never have took place. All right, but what I'm saying is, this is.
But we say the guy in Minnesota like it's an isolated incident. We're not. We're talking about years of systematic killing of black individuals.
Years of systematic killings. It has happened. But what we need to do is we need to come together.
It hasn't happened. It is happening. Continually.
Can I jump in a second? I'd like
Justin tried to speak. Listen, Justin has not been able to get a sentence in the last hour and a half.
I apologize for that. Let Justin finish. Sorry, Justin.
The issue is step aside from what we all know is real. The systemic institutionalized racism. That's a dynamic that is real. It is not the sole dynamic that is involved in the legitimization in the system of the shooting of a human being when shooting was not justified under any rational thinking. You have to understand that aspect, that second dimension, if you really want to understand this issue. And let Justin try to begin to explain what he's trying to describe in that.
I'd like to add here a moment that Justin has spoken extensively, and I've learned a lot from him today. So to say that he hasn't spoken a sentence perhaps exaggerates, but I understand where you're coming from, Charlie, and I appreciate it. I'd like to ask you this, Greg and Justin. Do you think that if America addressed the issue of unlimited guns, in fact, more guns than people are in this country, 350 million guns, 320 million people, do you think that if the police came to a scene knowing that more than likely the person does not have a gun, regardless of race or age or gender, that they would be safer? Don't you believe that if the police thought more than likely, like in Germany or England or Italy or Japan, that the person whom they're stopping for a broken light does not have a gun, the person to whom they're speaking to from a side window does not have a gun, that we would have less shooting? And that if we address the gun situation in America, that we would in large measure also address the unlawful shooting of people in America by police who are fearful of their own lives?
I agree. There's a lot of cops that are scared. There's a lot of cops that are scared that they shouldn't be. There's a lot of things that are going on that shouldn't be happening at all. I agree with you to a point with the guns. I believe that everybody has the right to defend themselves, but I also do believe that, this is just my opinion, that people have the right to defend themselves according to our Constitution. But at that same note, I think police would feel maybe safer. But you have to go to every scene and think of the worst case scenario and hope for the best outcome. Because if you don't, you go underprepared and you can get yourself killed that way. And Greg, to answer your question, and just to tell you, man, I do not think what's happening in the African American population is fair or just in any way, shape, or form. I never had family that had slaves or anything like that. I do believe America, the President of the United States, needs to say, hey, we apologize for having slaves in the United States of America. And everyone says, well, President Obama won't do it because he's African American. Well, guess what? To me, President Obama is not African American. To me, President Obama is the President of the United States. He represents all people of the United States. And I think the government needs to recognize and say, hey, we're sorry for the actions that we did hundreds of years ago. Now, do I think that money or reparations need to be paid out? No. But I do think that we need to address the issue and say, hey, we apologize. Because I have talked to many civil rights activists, and they all come together and they're like, I've talked to people at the BLM, and they tell me, they're like, we need to take responsibility. The white people need to take responsibility for African Americans being enslaved. My thing is we as a population, we as a people need to say, hey, we're sorry that this happened to you. My family came here way after slavery. But with that being said, man, I hate it happened. And there's nothing we can do and go back. We can't go back 200 years ago and change that. But what we can do is come together now and formulate an understanding to move forward. And what is going on in law enforcement communities across the country right now, there is systematic racism. Without a shadow of a doubt in my mind, there's systematic racism. But how can we come together to create the change that we need in our communities? And David Romay, I've went to departments. I've got SOPs on the way they're supposed to act. There is no Bill of Rights for the departments that I've worked at. When a police officer when a police officer is involved in a shooting, he is subject to the SOP. And if he did not follow that SOP and he did something improper, he can be criminally charged.
Justin, what departments have you worked at? I don't want to make this a diminishment of you or anything that you're saying, but Charlie made a point, and it was right. We have to have understanding of these processes. Now, most states have policemen's Bill of Rights, and like Charlie said, they are heavily inundated by the fraternal order of police, either state or the local. Some of them have multiples. Like New York has multiple.
All right. The bill, what you're talking about is fraternal order police. A police officer has to join that group to be a part of the FOP. Just like the Police Benefit Association, the PBA, a police officer in the state of Tennessee, and I've worked in Tennessee, you have to join those organizations to get that protection. Basically what you're doing is you're paying for your legal fees in case you do get involved in a shooting, and what the department doesn't already authorize or pay for, the PBA or the FOP comes in and backs you up.
Okay, so the Policeman's Bill of Rights exists in Tennessee, and it protects officers who are privileged or who have committed crimes or possibly committed crimes or allegedly committed crimes. So even though locally you didn't know it exists, those are protections that those officers have, and it's part of the problem.
It's only if they join those organizations they get that protection.
That's not true.
If
your department subscribes to it, if the state, so you remember you're certified by the state, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Okay, so you as an officer had the benefit of using that anytime you wanted, and you had global protections. You didn't have to be in the union. Now you're talking to someone who was an investigator for over 13 years, okay, before I became an activist. So when I don't think like a civil rights activist. I think like an investigator. But we have to understand the logistics that are involved in this problem. And if we say things like, let's talk to BLM, Black Lives Matters, and let's have them talk to the police. Well, these things are not going to happen because BLM is an abolitionist group. They don't believe in police. They don't believe in that type of organization. The type of organization that's necessary in order to make change has to come from the federal government of the United States of America. Absolutely. And the laws have to change to protect the citizens.
Let me ask a question, Greg and Justin. Justin, maybe you can tell me this. What is the difference between me? I'm a citizen. I'm not a policeman or a soldier anymore, nothing. What if I shot a policeman in self-defense? I shot a policeman in self-defense because I feared for my life. Or a policeman shot me because he feared for his life. How would we be treated once we arrived at the police station? The policeman versus me. Would we be treated the same way?
No.
Thank you.
There lies the problem.
There's the problem.
Greg, you got a copy of this Bill of Rights for the state of Tennessee Police Departments? Because I can't find it anywhere.
I'm going to put it on. I'm going to put it on the post right now.
I need to see the one for Tennessee.
Yes, it's the Tennessee. It was enacted in 1989 under Code 38-8-301. I'll give it to you right now.
It's also in the city paper for Nashville's online services. The city paper. A group of police officers claims it has proof of low morale in Nashville's police department, but the police chief says the results of the survey are out of context.
But that is for Nashville Metro. That's not for the entire police department. That's not for all police officers.
Well, there's no doubt police are under grave stress, too, because of the system. I mean, the police, to me, are as victims, oftentimes, like in World War II. To me, the German average soldier was as much a victim as the people they were killing in Russia or Poland. They were obeying the law. If they didn't obey the law, they would be punished. Their families would be killed. Look, the policemen are the tools of the establishment to keep the poor and the blacks and the Hispanics and the uneducated white people who might oppose Wall Street and banks and the politicians in control. The police are merely the instruments of power. And I feel sorry for them because it's on them too. They're just doing the hard work, the dirty work, I should say.
I've got a funny feeling Alex Salazar has just joined us for the last half hour. Alex?
Yes, right here, my friend.
Hi, Alex.
Hi.
This is the last half hour of the show. You've been missing all of it. We've been trying to get you for some time.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, Alex. Apologies accepted. We love you. We miss you. If you stand by, you kind of get a feel as to where we're at the moment. Were you going to respond to that, Justin?
I'm looking over at the Bill of Rights he's talking about. It's a law. It's a state law, and all it is it's the prevention and detection of crime, employment and training of police officers. Basically, it's what they can and can't do. But it doesn't have anything really about shootings.
Do you want to define that anymore, Greg?
Yeah, if you go into the language, once you drill it down, we'll be able to tell why we have the problem that exists. Now, in Tennessee, it might not be the problem that it is in other states, but it is a problem nonetheless.
I'm not saying it doesn't exist anywhere else, but it's not. There's nowhere in the state of Tennessee, and every training academy I've been to, and in training I've been to in the state of Tennessee, I've ever heard it's all right to kill black people. I've never heard that. It's never been
said
stated.
That. Let's not confuse the argument, please, or the debate, or the question.
But it's not. There's nowhere in there protecting an officer if they got into a shooting if it was unjustified.
In Tennessee, the laws are particularly favorable to law enforcement, sir.
Okay, so let's try and bring it back. We've got about 20 minutes or so to really try and hit home some points here, guys. We were looking at the Deadly Encounter Part 2, which was the aftermath. I called it the uprising, the aftermath of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, and which culminated really in a series of deaths that have taken place over the last few years that have seen the rise of death by black individuals at the hands of police. 1,200 per year minimum. And already this year, we're almost there already, which means that this year will far surpass the amount of individuals that were killed at the hands of police last year. And something has got to drastically change if we're about to see a drop in that, and more importantly, if we're about to see a relationship develop between the police and the communities that has them trusting one another again. Dr. David Ramey brought up the point about how many more guns there were to American citizens, 350 million guns to 320 million individuals, and we're still yet to answer this question. Is not gun control the real heart of the issue here? Less guns, less murders. Less guns, less killings. Less guns,
less fear.
Less shootings. Less guns, less fear. Now, come on. You know, let's really start looking at the heart of the matter, because we asked this question some time ago Whereas when you're talking about the individual who stands up before his superior officers and the Supreme Courts, talking about he shot the individual in the fear of his life while he was executing his duty, I'm still yet to understand or have anybody explain to me with any great detail how come a female officer who is less equipped to manage a strong, bold individual intent on getting away and intent on doing wrong, how come we haven't got figures astronomically high of female individuals who've had to shoot down an innocent individual or any individual whatsoever because they were also in fear of their life? And I'm wondering why we're not seeing that dynamic change as far as the officers are concerned. And I'm still waiting to hear an answer. Alex, are you there, my friend?
I am, my friend.
You know, in the aftermath of what took place in Dallas, in the aftermath of what took place in Memphis, in Baton Rouge, and in Minnesota, in fact, we saw the Memphis chief of police marching with Black Lives Matter publicized. Now, there's a lot of attack. Every time there's a black individual killed and Black Lives Matter comes out to protest or march, there's a lot of negativity that comes out, and there's a lot of hijacking of these peaceful protests that are done by communities who want to support the families in particular and speak for the silent voices of those that have been lost. But here we had a chief of police against the trend who actually stepped out on a protest in Memphis with Black Lives Matter. Are we going to see more of that, do you think, Alex?
I think we have been seeing a trend where there's more police officers that are getting it now, and that they're seeing, what the whole issue with what the phrase Black Lives Matter means. And so as time goes on, as we eradicate this ignorance that is so systemic within law enforcement and within the, society at large, here in the United States, I mean, it's really crazy that we even have to say Black Lives Matter, but obviously they do, because these lynchings, these killings of blacks have continued on unabated, as we continue to see with the whole video thing. And so, I address the police officers, the FBI agents, and those people who might be listening here, to this show and analyzing, what we're talking about here, and that they would do good to get on the boat here, to stop acting ignorant and to recognize that this has been going on for the longest, and that, it's time for us to do something about it. When I was with Greg out in Chicago a couple weeks ago, how you doing, Greg, by the way?
Hey, Alex, how are you?
Great. He saw that, there is a change, a shift within the whistleblower community. Also people like with Justin Powers, obviously there's still a lot of differences and what have you in ways of thinking. But the main thing is that we're talking about this. So as we continue to talk about it, you're going to get more chiefs like this progressive chief in Memphis that are going to be with us. And hopefully, these same people here who are there spying, on us, trying to see, well, what are they talking about? Are they going to talk anything about overthrowing the country or trying to continue to demonize Black Lives Matter too, trying to declare it a terrorist organization? By no means are they anything like that. I've worked on Black Lives Matter investigations, helping out some of these people that are being demonized and being accused, and by no means are they affiliated with anything like that. Are there people that are pissed off? Oh, hell yeah, they're pissed off. They're pissed off because we continue to see these people be executed day in and day out. And so I'm praying, that progressive chiefs like this and others, come forward.
Without fear of retribution, I would hope.
Right, exactly.
I got something on the Memphis police chief, by the way. I do know for a fact that they were on the interstate protesting, and I do know for a fact that the governor was called basically, and the Tennessee Highway Patrol, or the state police, they call them. It's called Tennessee Highway Patrol here, but basically they're state police officers. They were lined up, and they were going to forcefully remove the crowd. There's 100 of them lined up, and there's about another 300 behind them lined up to forcefully move the crowd. The Memphis police chief said, hey, let me try to de-escalate the situation. So he locked arms with the folks and got them off the bridge and got them down on the main streets, because he knew if the state police interjected, there had probably been full-scale riots in Memphis. This happened in the 60s too, and in 68, the state police interceded, and it created mass riots. So because the interstate is federal property, but it's dictated by the state of Tennessee, the state has control over the interstate. So I just wanted to let you know that's what happened with that. But when people started protesting down in the Elvis area by Elvis Presley and all that, the police chief was out there making sure people were getting arrested. So yeah, he did the right thing. He's being criticized by a lot in law enforcement in the local area. To me, he absolutely did the right thing because he de-escalated the situation. It was one of those, he's damned if he did and he was damned if he didn't.
But you know what, Kervin and Justin, that's the job of the police. It's to de-escalate, while people are losing it and going off, they're supposed to do that, instead of causing riots, you act there like a human being instead of wearing that stupid uniform and your stars and badge and things, and you act like a human being. I think that's really what people want to see, is they want to see some humanness instead of all this, robot acting, uncaring behavior, where they just step out and they say, as we've seen when I was in Ferguson, when this one police officer came out to me in an incident that was caught, even the president took note when he said, I'm going to blow your fucking heads off. How is that de-escalating? Okay, telling me and a bunch of CNN reporters and the whole world is watching here, I'm going to blow your fucking heads off. And so kudos to this chief and to other chiefs and police officers and people who have some common sense, okay? We need people with common sense, not cowboys who want to start a race war, who want to start fights, so we need to support these people. Yes, there are a lot of bad police officers. I don't think, that anyone disagrees with that with a shadow of a doubt. But the so-called good ones, the ones that even stay quiet, here, they're wanting to help out, but they're scared. As you mentioned earlier, Kervin, there's this whole thing about retribution, about breaking the code of silence. So, this is definitely, a very enlightening conversation.
No, go on, David.
I want to say that earlier in the show we brought up a case in Atlanta, and we can learn from police chiefs and mayors and other leaders in the community on the right way to act as well. In this case, last month, less than a month ago, 3 weeks ago, a young man, Dervis Kane Rogers, 22 years old, African-American, was shot and killed by an Atlanta police officer, James Burns. Now, Burns was called to a scene of an apartment complex in which suspicious activity was going on. That's all it said, suspicious. When he arrived, he saw a car parked on the side of the road. Well, the car decided to leave. Well, I'd leave too if a policeman pulled up by me. The policeman put on the lights. After he put on the lights, Mr. Rogers continued driving. The policeman jumped out of his car. He told the man to stop. Well, how could the man hear him? Both windows were closed. And then he shot through the passenger side of the window. With one shot, killed the 22-year-old African-American by a shot to the head. Murdered him right on the site. Immediately, the police chief, and I think this refers to what Justin said earlier that should happen, the police chief, his name is George Turner, fired the police officer. Fired him. His name is James Burns. On the site, fired him. Then the Georgia Police of Investigations, Department of Investigations, began to investigate him. And what did the police investigate him for? For possible criminal violations. Not for murder, but possible criminal violations. But nevertheless, he's being investigated. He's been fired, and he turned himself in, and he's been arrested. This is the way it should happen. Because what this does is tells the African-American and other community, lives do matter. Lives do matter. And when a policeman does something like this, we're going to take immediate action. And we're going to look into it. And if he's found guilty, he's going to pay a price. This sends a message to policemen that you are accountable. You can't be cowboys. This sends a message to the family of Dervais Rogers that his life mattered. And this tells people you can feel more secure in the future because police officers are not going to be able to act in this way and get away with it. This is a good example.
Absolutely. And the bottom line is, you have over here in the UK, we have what's referred to as the Police Complaints Commission. And originally, it was a police body that would oversee any investigation of any form of suggestive criminal activity by police officers. When we realized that didn't work, that was quickly changed. And now the Police Complaints Commission no longer consists of a police committee panel, right? But citizens of the white-collar community who are now able to have an unselfish and unbiased look at the evidence that's in front of them and come up with a decision as to whether or not this is a lawful or an unlawful killing before they can then go ahead with a prosecution on that officer. And we have actually had several officers prosecuted and imprisoned in this country for unlawful conduct and unlawful killing. So for me, I struggle to see where the platform of trust is going to be developed in America.
Kervin,
until we start seeing a change, right, in justice reform where prosecutions are expected for wrongdoing.
And Kervin, contrast that, and Justin and Greg, all of you can comment on this, contrast that with Chicago, where a policeman, a radical, insane policeman, got out and shot a young man unarmed on a highway 16 times. And after he was lying dead from 16 bullet wounds, he asked another policeman for another gun to shoot him some more. What happened there? Mayor Rahm Emanuel paid the family $5 million to shut down the house. The city council paid for it. And for 1 year, nobody knew anything about it. Now compare the difference.
And why did Rap, I remember watching that, and I thought that was an injustice to the family and to the community that the mayor withheld that information for over a year.
Yeah.
Yep. But don't you think the family, don't you think Justin, was that Justin?
No, that was Alex.
Yes.
Oh, Alex.
Oh, that was
Alex.
me.
Oh, that was Justin,
Alex,
sorry.
Okay, Alex, I'm glad you're here too. But don't you think, let's be honest here, I consider the family, in that case, somewhat guilty too. Can you take blood money of $5 million? I would not want my family to take $5 million to shut up about me being murdered.
You're doing a disservice to the rest of your people. That's what you're doing.
Exactly. I consider the family to be
David,
horrors.
Dr. Romay, I'm going to be honest with you.
But 1 second, sorry, Justin.
That happens a lot.
It does, but here's the thing, and I can get an understanding as to why they might do that, David. The only way, and I'm not justifying it, but the level of trust that is felt by the black community as to whether or not they're going to get any justice whatsoever, it's almost as if that's some form of compensation for the justice that they're not going to receive. And that's the wrong mentality to have. I wouldn't do it myself, but I can understand. It explains, it doesn't justify, but it does explain why some families tend to take the money and run, because they don't have any faith in the justice system whatsoever. Go on,
Can
Greg.
I speak on that part?
Go on, Greg.
So on that part, like, here's an example in the case of Tamir Rice. Tamir Rice, the settlement that has been approved by the mayor has been $5.5 million. Now, what's going to happen in a lot of these cases is the families will be able to be paid litigation from the city, and the city will settle. But at the same time, they've been made to sign waivers, and the waivers will stop any further harm from the city if they take the money, or the municipality if they take the money. So they should take the money, because it's going to end up in a civil litigation anyway. But they shouldn't sign waivers, because these cases can educate the community as far as what we need to do, and the family's voice matters in this now, later on in the future, as we're fighting against police brutality.
Right, we've only got we're about 6 minutes left before the end of the show. Justin, how do you see this thing moving? How do you see it changing?
I think if it's the only way it's going to change is if we hold law enforcement accountable and we hold ourselves accountable as well. And the individuals, like Dr. Romay says, don't take the money. Yeah. Let it go to court, fight it with your attorneys, etc. Do not, like Greg said, don't sign the waivers. That's what I was going to tell you, Greg. I was going to say just right before you said it was majority of these families that are taking the money, they're having to sign agreements that they're not going to pursue anything. Me personally, I would hope my family, or if, say my child was killed by the police and it was unlawful, I wouldn't take a cent. Personally, I would fight it. I'd fight it.
Not a
What's
cent.
that?
Not a cent.
Not a
cent.
cent.
It would have to be justice.
I would fight it.
It has to be justice.
I think it's an injustice when you take money away from a city after a loved one's been killed. To me, that's an injustice to the person. It's an injustice to your family. To me, it's like the ultimate disrespect.
Alex, I know you haven't had much time to get involved in the show, but how do you see things changing from here? How do you see the impact of what took place in Baton Rouge and Minnesota and Atlanta and Memphis? How do you see that impacting, especially with the culmination of what took place in Dallas? Where do you see things going now?
Well, the white supremacists are now out in full force. Of course, they don't wear sheets anymore, but they've come out. When I was in Chicago a couple weeks ago at a whistleblower police officer gathering, which Greg was there, it was revealed to me by another former police officer, retired guy who had a couple of years that he left, where he stated that it was common knowledge that police officers and white supremacist elements are responsible for the mass killings and shootings that occur during the long weekends. I know I had talked to Justin about this too. And so with this type of behavior going on, where you got police officers stepping into the mix here in a very highly volatile city like Chicago, where you got the Nation of Islam and people who are just fed up with this, this continues to be a very volatile situation. If the federal agents that are listening, or task force members that are hearing, trying to understand what's going on, can do anything, they need to start investigating the Chicago PD especially, okay, and the president too, because they have long been aware of this going on. Again, the police officer that I spoke to that mentioned this to me said that it's common knowledge that white supremacist police factions are responsible for a lot of the disarray and chaos that's going on within Chicago, and I can only imagine that it's also going on within the country. And so the situation, it's very, very delicate right now. I mean, any incident can set it off, where we have riots going on nationwide. I mean, something of an unknown proportion, where we have genocidal conditions.
Okay. We've got about 3 minutes left. Very quickly, I just want a comment from Greg and then a quick closing comment from Dr. David Romay. Greg, where do you see this going, and what do you see some of the answers might be of? Just very briefly.
Well, I think that we have to change the laws of the community. I think it's heading directly into the Supreme Court of the United States of America. And as we are talking America, we're talking about connecting the dots around the country. South Africa, we're seeing rallies and protests. The UK, we're seeing rallies and protests. Just all around the world, change has to happen.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Charlie, we've got about a minute left. How do you sum up what we've discussed today and where this might go? Hi, David.
Hello?
David. Yeah, but how do you? Final word from you, David.
Oh! I thought you said Charlie.
Yeah, I did say Charlie by accident, but
okay.
Charlie's
very quickly, I would add, I do not believe victims' families of police murders should take money before the evidence is brought to trial and civilly litigated. But afterwards, they should go for every last dime the city has. Until we make the cities pay out of their stomachs for this kind of activity, it will not stop. The Jews, my people, go after the Germans and the Russians and the Poles and everybody who stole our money, our art, and took our lives. And it's the only way you make sure it doesn't happen again. But only after the facts are out. Okay. Secondly, I'd like to say, Turkey proves beyond a doubt that people rising up can stop evil. The Turkish attempted coup proves that people can make a difference. And finally, I'd like to say, it is not the police alone, that are exacerbating the racial problems against young blacks and Hispanics and women in America. Look into the boardrooms.
5
Look
seconds.
into the
We've got to go,
newsrooms.
David. We've got to go.
Look over all of our country. The problem is us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. This is Issues Today, another edition, and we will be back next week. Myself, Dr. David Romeo, I'd like to thank Alex, Charlie, Greg, and Justin for joining us today. Apologies for Cephas. We've run right out of time. Obviously, look forward to the repost of this show as it goes out all over the YouTube and all over the world later on tonight. Thank you very much. But this is it from us on World Jam Global Radio. Issues Today, coming to you live from Coventry City, United Kingdom. Thank you very much, guys. God bless.
World Jam Global Radio. This is Clarity.